After months of waiting, the new media rights deal with the Pac-12 is coming any day now, and we're going to talk about what it means for the Zags.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and folks, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Lots to cover today. Rule changes for next season were made official, including a change to replay review. We're going to get into that to close out the show, plus the latest workouts and big board rankings for our guy Ryan Nembhard, including working out with his hometown team, the Toronto Raptors. We'll talk about that as the draft draws near, but big news, which is kind of non-news, it's sort of news regarding the Pac-12. For those of you who missed this, I did not address it in the Caliph Battle Draft preview episode on Tuesday because we were waiting to see if we were going to get any final news, and we will very soon, but we have not yet. But what we do know is that Gonzaga has signed their grant of rights to join the Pac-12 conference starting in 2026-27. That in and of itself is not particularly noteworthy in the sense that it's kind of just a formality. When Gonzaga first agreed to join the Pac-12 about a year ago, they signed paperwork with the Pac-12 basically saying it was a term sheet. We're agreeing to join the Pac-12 based on these terms. And that was like a binding document, but it was not the full document. It did not fully encapsulate what it means to sign away your media rights and to sign away your grant of rights the way that these deals did. So most of this reporting that I'm going to talk about in the show comes from the great John Canzano, who has his own website, John Canzano BFT. He is an independent reporter who covers the Pac-12 and has a ton of sources inside. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about here. This is from his newsletter, which you can find. Just search his website. You'll be able to find it there. Regardless, they signed a new form called the Pac-12 Membership Agreement. And this is what Gonzaga signed along with the grant of rights. And again, we expected these things were going to happen. The reason that this is significant, and I'll give a little bit of detail about the grant of rights, but the reason this is significant is it was the last critical step before revealing the media rights partnership, the media rights deals. And this is how we're going to know a couple of key things. One, how in the heck we're going to watch Gonzaga basketball games starting in 2026. That's the most important thing that we're about to learn when this media rights deal comes out. Are games still going to be on ESPN? Are they going to be on other platforms? Am I going to have to get a streaming service to watch Gonzaga games? Those are all questions that many folks have had for a long time that will get at least closer to being answered, or at least answered in some capacity when the media rights deal does get revealed. The other question, the big one, is how much money Gonzaga is going to make. Notably, how much money all of the Pac-12 schools are going to make, as the reporting has indicated that Gonzaga is going to get a full share of the media rights deal, meaning that if Oregon State and Washington State are getting $11 million and Boise State and all those are getting $11 million, Gonzaga, despite not having a football team, will also get $11 million. That when this deal comes out, that will be solidified and confirmed one way or another if that is the case. Speaking on the grant of rights, it just basically this means that the school has assigned their media rights to the Pac-12. It's a formality. Again, it's any conference would do this, just meaning that the rights of Gonzaga's games and sporting events to be on TV are now owned by the Pac-12. They were previously owned by the WCC. Again, not a particularly crucial step other than being a good indication that this media deal is coming soon. And per a source to John Canzano, they said both needed to be finalized, meaning the membership agreement and the grant of rights, before we could officially sign and announce media rights partners. So it sounds like this is coming soon. There's been some reporting that says imminent, day or this week, couple of days, like nothing concrete. Nobody's going to come out and say specifically exactly what date this is going to happen because we don't know. But it does sound like we're talking about a couple of weeks at max, and potentially as soon as this week or early next week in terms of knowing the media rights deal. Some other reporting that we have heard, nothing has been signed. But there was a meeting between Pac-12 ADs and presidents on Tuesday morning, a Zoom call. The meeting was about nailing down those next steps. Again, further proof that this is probably coming down the pipeline very soon. We also know that there are as many as 4 partners involved. Again, this is per John Canzano, that it's not going to be hey, the Pac-12 is with ESPN, boom, bang, done. That's it. ESPN's got full rights to everything. It's not going to be that. There's as many as 4 partners involved, and these 3 are widely expected to be involved: CBS, ESPN, and the CW. All of them are currently connected to the Pac-12. All of them are part of the media rights deal for 2025, which for the Pac-12 is just Oregon State and Washington State football. They are the 2 Pac-12 members in 2025 for football. The rest of their sports, of course, being housed currently in the WCC. But those media partners being involved in 2025 makes it fairly clear, or at least likely, that they will be involved in 2026. Others have reported that there's an extremely high likelihood that 3 of the 4 media rights partners, if it is truly 4, are CBS, ESPN, and the CW. It could just be those 3. It could be those 3 plus 1 more. Maybe there is a change and one of these drops and you add 2 other ones. But I think that the likelihood, I would be comfortable expecting these 3 and a streaming service. That would be my guess. Whether it's Amazon, whether it's Max, whether it's something else, I think that's a fairly safe guess. But there's no point in spending a bunch of time speculating or planning, because we're going to get the actual update, hopefully, like we said, within a week or so. The big thing that we want to learn out of this, obviously, again, outside of the actual media partners, is how much money are the Zags making? Because the amount of money that's going to come through Gonzaga's program from this media rights deal is going to tell us a lot about their ability to remain competitive in the college basketball space in the House NCAA settlement era. We talked about this extensively in a previous episode. Like I said, we will get into it more in future episodes, but programs are effectively going to have somewhere in the ballpark of $20 to $22 million per year as a cap that they are allowed to spend on NIL by directly paying student athletes. This is from the House settlement, which was finalized last Friday. Gonzaga probably won't have $20 to $22 million annually just at their disposal to spend, but many other programs like the SEC and Big Ten schools are going to spend estimated 75% of their money on football. So Gonzaga needs to be able to outspend those programs, the 15% or so that they're going to spend on basketball. And again, it'll be different for some. Like, I think Kentucky will spend more than $4 million, but I think a lot of other SEC Big Ten schools are going to kind of be limited to more like $3-ish million from their own money. Again, student athletes can sign NIL deals with third parties, and I think there's still going to be plenty of that. But if Gonzaga's, part of this deal and they're a full share, and the full share is $14 million, which is kind of on the higher end of what is being estimated, and Gonzaga shares, decides to spend 3/4 of that on men's basketball, or even, a little more than half, let's say 10 out of $14 million on men's basketball. They spend, 1.5 on women's basketball. The rest goes to their other sports. Again, that's just a guess. That's, it'll fluctuate, but if Gonzaga is able to spend close to $10 million on men's basketball, they will likely be spending more money than many, many programs across college basketball, and almost certainly more money than their counterparts in the Pac-12, who will not have the amount of money necessary to spend that kind of money on basketball. They just won't have it. This is not going to be an option for them. So again, when we find out this information, when we get a sense of what this looks like, we'll have a better idea of Gonzaga's ability to potentially be very competitive financially with the other programs across the entire college basketball landscape. It's going to be really great news, of course, for this program. The last kind of thing is that this is eventually, obviously, the media rights deal becomes a step forward towards finding out the final members of the Pac-12. There's not really an update there. Canzano reported that the expansion has narrowed to just 1 or 2 options, said it was a wider net that has shrank in recent times. No surprise there. He also said UNLV is becoming less and less of an option. Many folks already felt that was true with the mediation going on with the Mountain West. So I would expect UNLV to not be the program that is named in the next 2 weeks before July 1st. The general consensus is that it'll probably be Texas State. And if it's 2, it'll be Texas State and UT San Antonio. Is it super sexy from a men's basketball perspective? No. Gets the conference in Texas, not a bad place to be. These are potentially sleeping giant programs with some added financial investment. We could see them grow. Texas State's a bit more of a sleeping giant. UTSA is a small program in a big city that doesn't command a ton of attention. Their fan base is not great. So I'm not thrilled about UTSA if it does end up being them. But these two schools at least then have natural travel partners. And depending on how they schedule the Pac-12 conference, it's possible that Gonzaga would avoid road trips out there. Again, assuming like it's like the WCC or other conferences where you don't play every team on the road every year. So it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. Gonzaga going to UTSA every single year is far from the best result because it's a long travel trip for a team that doesn't really help them very much, but it could be worse. It could be Sac State. It's not Sac State. So it could be worse. Memphis is dwindling in likelihood. I think there's some concern on the Pac-12 side of bringing their Olympic sports along and having to send their student athletes to long travel trips in non-revenue generating sports. Still could be Memphis down the line. This is not a permanent thing. Even if they don't get added this go around, it could happen in the future. So that's another one we'll keep a close eye on. And then there's still a belief that St. Mary's will get involved here as well. It'll be after the media rights deal. It'll be after the final football member is named. Again, as a reminder, the Pac-12 needs one more full member that plays football in order to count as an FBS conference, which is critical for them. So they need to add a football school. They're going to do that before they add St. Mary's. But after the media rights deal is announced, after they announce probably Texas State, maybe UTSA as well, then the rumors about St. Mary's will pick up, and it could happen fairly quickly after that. Notably, St. Mary's is expected to take a significantly reduced share of the media rights deal, which would just be kind of funny if Gonzaga was getting a full share and St. Mary's was getting like wildly less than a full share. And to be clear, I think that's fairly deserved. Gonzaga's allocated a lot more money and resources to their facilities and has a bigger brand awareness. Like they deserve to have that. But certainly if they're both in the same conference trying to compete with each other and Gonzaga just has millions and millions more dollars to spend, that's not going to make some of our Gales friends all that happy, and for good reason. But we'll see if that happens. It's another thing we're keeping an eye on as we continue this conversation, probably multiple times in the next couple of weeks. But folks, we're going to move on from that now. Ryan Nembhard got to work out in his home country with the Toronto Raptors. We're going to discuss that and what the latest is on his draft stock as we are about almost exactly 2 weeks away from the first round of the NBA draft. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, there's nothing like the NBA playoffs. We've been seeing it. This series has been incredible through the first couple of games. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that if you can, you want to experience it live. And boy, have this year's matchups delivered in a big way. And if you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app, they consistently drop the closer it gets to tip-off. So with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees at checkout, Gametime is a total game changer. I love that I can see the exact view from my seat before I buy these tickets. There's no surprises. You know what you're going to be looking at. And the app makes it super simple. 2 taps, and I'm done. With Gametime's guarantee, you also know that you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Game 3, Pacers, Thunder. It's going on in Indiana on Wednesday. Tickets to get in the door under $500 on Gametime. And they have super deals where you can get tickets for under $1,000 right at center court. Phenomenal view. Check it out on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime. And folks, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off that first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from our conversation about the Pac-12 grant of rights agreement, the upcoming media rights deal announcement. We're going to, of course, have more on this as we learn more, as we find out more. It should take up, honestly, a lot of the real estate on the show in the next couple of weeks as we are in the slow season. And also, that's a really big deal for this Gonzaga program. But now we're going to talk about one of the other topics that's already come up a lot this month and will continue to come up a lot, which is the upcoming NBA draft. The draft will begin on June 25th, and the second round will be on June 26th, as they have now made it a 2-day event, which I don't love, but hey, it is what it is. We did a full draft profile on Caliph Battle on Tuesday's episode. We'll do ones for those with Ryan Nembhard and Ben Gregg and Nolan Hickman over the next couple of weeks, but want to focus on Ryan Nembhard today, the most likely Zag to get selected in the draft. He worked out on Monday with the Toronto Raptors, just a cool opportunity for Nembhard to get to work out with his home country team, with the team he grew up rooting for, with the team that, the only team that was in Canada for most of his youth, which is wild to say. I was like, oh, he was probably a kid when the Grizzlies were in Vancouver. But as I'm thinking about it now, he probably was not even born yet. So that is another moment to make me feel a little bit old, but also a reminder of how much the Raptors mean to those in Canada and how cool it is for Ryan to get a chance to work out with this Toronto team, just like how Ben Gregg got a chance to work out with the Portland Trailblazers. And as we talked about with Caleb Battle, he's expecting to work out with as many as 18 to 20 different teams in the NBA. He did not give any names outside of the Sacramento Kings, but maybe he gets to work out with the Nets. He's from New Jersey. Again, he probably grew up rooting for them when they were in New Jersey, so that would be the closest to his hometown team. Unfortunately, since we're on this topic, our guy Nolan Hickman will not get to work out with his hometown team, as they are no longer his hometown team, the Seattle Supersonics, of course, now the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's a bit of a bummer for Nolan, but hoping these guys get the chance to work out for as many teams as they want, obviously, and get a chance to kind of showcase their skills in front of. But it's also a little extra cool when they get to work out for a team that they grew up rooting for. The Raptors have 2 picks in this upcoming NBA draft, number 9 overall and number 39 overall. Obviously, Nembhard's not going in the lottery, but 39, it's kind of the high end. It's the high end of where he's projected. Most mocks either don't have him getting selected or have him getting selected outside of the top 40 or 45. 39, again, it's when you're talking about second round picks, like it's the range of likely outcomes is a lot higher. Like Cooper Flagg's range is 1, Dylan Harper's range is like 2, but Ryan Nembhard's range is like 20 different spots. Like it realistically, I mean, look no further than his brother. Andrew was projected at this time before Andrew was drafted, like 2 weeks before the draft. Most places thought he was going to go undrafted, or if he did get drafted, it would be late in the second round. Basically the same projections that are being made about his brother, Ryan. Andrew ended up getting selected 31st overall, the first pick of the second round, signed a guaranteed deal, and has fully outperformed the spot in the draft by being one of the best players out of that draft class through his first 3 years. Again, Ryan's upside is capped by being 5 inches shorter than his brother, but you can't tell me that a team wouldn't that a team wouldn't consider him in the 30s based on what his brother did. And if they have a strong workout with him, again, they're different players. Andrew's a bit more of a dog defensively, more likely to contribute on that end of the floor than Ryan ever will. But Ryan is a prolific passer. Andrew's a good passer, but Ryan is so unbelievably good at breaking down a defense and navigating the pick and roll. He has NBA ready skills. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does well enough in a few workouts here and there that his draft stock boosts him into the 40s or maybe even the late 30s, where this Toronto team is picking at 39. We also know Nembhard had pre-draft workouts with the Atlanta Hawks and the Golden State Warriors. He's probably had many others. They just haven't all been reported. Atlanta picks 2 picks in the first round, 13 and 22. So unless they're trading into the second round or expecting to go undrafted, that's a little bit less likely he ends up there. Golden State picks at 41. So once again, they're kind of in that range where it feels like it's a bit more likely that Nembhard might end up getting selected. There was also an updated big board from Sam Vecini, who's a writer at The Athletic, a phenomenal NBA draft mind, one of the best. Vecini does his big boards and his mock drafts while taking into consideration what he is hearing from scouts. Not everybody does that. That does not mean that their mock drafts or big boards are bad necessarily, but it does mean that Vecini's is likely to be a bit more accurate or to carrying a little bit, like I put a little bit more stock into what he's saying because he is getting feedback from people who actually are decision makers, or at least influence decision makers in terms of the NBA draft. Now, he has Nembhard at 57. So this is a big board, not a mock draft. So in theory, that puts Nembhard kind of right in the range of potentially getting selected, but also potentially falling out of the draft. Sam Vecini also broke down his draft in his mock draft, or his big board, into 8 different tiers. Tier 7 was from 37 to 54. Tier 8, which was the last tier, starts at 55 and encapsulates the rest of the players. So Nembhard being at 57 means he was one of the first players in that final tier, which he labeled as the two-ways, stashes, and exhibit 10s. So he's kind of labeling Nembhard as a guy who's likely to be a two-way contract guy or invited to camp but cut type of player, whereas tier 7 was more likely to actually stick in the NBA. But again, Nembhard right on that list. You should not take these super hard and fast. I thought it was a little notable that Ryan Nembhard was behind Chucky Hepburn, the starting point guard last year for Louisville, who is pretty much any other mock draft or big board that I've seen has Nembhard ahead of Chucky Hepburn. So I thought that was a little odd. Chucky's a great player, not even trying to take away from him at all. He's tremendous. He's a better scorer than Ryan, but the only place I've seen Chucky ahead of Nembhard So I think that's worth noting. Some other players that were of note for Gonzaga on Sam Viciini's big board. I guess we'll start with the players of note who are not on the big board, which was any of the other Gonzaga players. No Caleb Battle, no Nolan Hickman, no Ben Gregg. At this point, I have not seen Ben Gregg or Nolan Hickman on any top 100 big boards. I've seen Battle on one big board, but none of those three were on this list. So the other players of note, Cedric Coward, the former Washington State and Eastern Washington forward, was number 10, really high for him on this list. Liam McNeely, UConn forward that was connected to Gonzaga and then went off against them this year, was down at 21. Asa Newell, who was recruited by Gonzaga, and then they played him in the tournament at Georgia. He was at 30. Former Zag commit Alex Tui from Australia was at 37. Former Zag period, Hunter Salas, was at 42. Jameer Watkins from Florida State had been connected a little bit to Gonzaga, was at 54. And then former Arizona and North Carolina guard Caleb Love, who's just a name I know many will be familiar with, was at 63, just 6 spots behind Ryan Nembhard on that big board. We'll have more on this, more on the NBA draft, more draft profiles coming your way in the next couple of weeks here on Locked On Zags. But now we're going to move on and we're going to talk about rule changes, because College Hoops just finally announced some official rule changes for next season to speed up the pace of the game, which is a good thing, except I'm not sure if these rule changes are going to do enough to fix the problem. We'll talk about that in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And we're closing out the show talking about a more broad topic in the sport of college basketball, which was that the rule changes for this upcoming season have finally been finalized. They've been discussed a few weeks, maybe even a few months ago, that what they were going to talk about, what they were going to plan, but they officially made it official just on, I think on Tuesday or maybe on Monday afternoon or evening. So there's two main things. There's a couple other smaller things, but there's two main things: coaches' challenges and rule modifications for continuation. Both objectively good things that are being changed for college basketball. We'll start with the coaching challenge change. Right now, coaches can challenge, or going forward, coaches can challenge at any point during the game. They're allowed to use a challenge on the following things: out of bounds calls, basket interference or goaltending, or players in the restricted area. Those are now instantly challengeable by coaches. Coaches will be receiving one challenge per game, and they can only be challenged by coaches. A player cannot officially submit a challenge. Only a coach can do that, which is pretty consistent across other sports and very smart to not let emotional 21-year-olds determine when you should use your one challenge per game. That wouldn't be a good idea. So only coaches, and only if they have a timeout remaining, because it does burn a timeout. You can't Chris Webber your way into a coaching challenge here. If you don't have a timeout, you can't do it. You're not allowed. I think that's a good rule too, because it prevents coaches from using a challenge to effectively get an extra timeout. You're not going to be able to do that. So if you have a challenge left, if you have a timeout, you can use it. If you win, as in your challenges, you overturn the call and you get the result turned in your direction, you also get your challenge back. So basically you have up to 2, assuming you win the first one. If you do not win the first one, you lose your timeout. If you do win the first one, you get that challenge back. You still also burn a timeout, by the way, but if you have additional timeouts, you can then use a second challenge. But that's it. So if you win your first 2 challenges, you don't get a third one. If you win 2 challenges and then you want to challenge something else, you're probably going to have some words after the game with some people in the industry, because that's a pretty bad officiating if that ends up happening. And I'm sure, honestly, that it will at some point. So that's the main kind of crux of the coaching challenges and the rule changes there. So what it'll do is it will prevent officials from automatically reviewing any out of bounds call in the final 2 minutes, which has been the rule recently, and that has been exhausting. There was an NCAA tournament game. I don't remember which one. It was like a 3-point game. At 1:59, the ball went out of bounds, and the refs just automatically went to look at it. And I was like, this is going to take forever. And it did. And one of the biggest complaints about college basketball last year, outside of the transfer portal, I suppose, biggest in-game complaints out of college basketball was how long the end of games was taking. And I hate, like, I'm naturally try to be a positive person. And so I didn't spend a lot of airtime complaining about this. But I felt it in the moment. And I'm sure many of you did too. It's just, it's not just that it's like, oh, this is taking too long. Like, I'm not in a hurry to get to the end of the game. I like watching basketball, but it completely sucks the air out of the excitement of watching a close game. Like, it's not fun to watch anymore. And it kind of I've used this kind of phrase a lot on college basketball and on this show of like, we're losing the plot at some point. Like the NCAA, it happens with a variety of things. When the new ACC schedule doesn't have Carolina and NC State playing each other in Chapel Hill, that's ridiculous. When they did not approve the waiver for Ali Khalifa, despite he only spent 3 years in college, that was ridiculous. And those were things where it's like, we're so focused on the minute changes and like tinkering with things to make things even or fair or exactly right, that we're just missing like the greater picture of the sport and the reason people like basketball in the first place. And this feels like baseball is a great example of like, they made rule changes that a lot of people didn't like, the traditionalists didn't really like, to speed up the game, and it helped. It made the product better. More people are watching baseball. More people are engaging with baseball because they were willing to make changes to their sport with the sole intention of making the sport more watchable, because that's what matters. People want to watch the games. And in college basketball right now is not watchable when the refs are reviewing everything. And unfortunately, while this coaching challenge is a good and positive change, it is a small fix. I'm going to quote Matt Nolander, whose article at CBS was phenomenal about this. He said, it turns a huge problem into a big problem. It's not as big of a problem as it used to be, but it's still a big problem because instant replay is still going to be used by the officials for timing mistakes. This one kills me. They'll take 10 minutes to look at the clock to determine if there should be 2.5 seconds or 2.3 seconds left. It's certain key points in games that is very important to get this right. And I understand that, and it is a necessary evil at times, but they use it way too much. And it just doesn't matter. It is not that big of a deal. I know we have the technology to get this exactly right down to the millisecond, but do we need to do it every single time and make a game that shouldn't take more than 2 hours take 2 hours and 40 minutes? No, we do not need to do that. Refs will also still have the ability to review not only timing mistakes, but scoring errors, shot clock violations, 2s versus 3s, was your foot on the line, flagrant fouls. So all these things are still going to be looked at by officials. So is it going to make a huge difference? Probably not. Is it a good change? Yes. But it feels like putting a Band-Aid over an issue that's a little bit more gaping than that. Let's put it that way. Now, on a positive note, more positive note, I should say, they're finally catching up with the times on the continuation rules. Many of you who are also NBA watchers will know what I'm talking about. For those of you who do not, the new rule, I'm going to quote directly what they wrote here because it's a little bit easier. This is the language from the NCAA on the rule change for continuous motion. Quote, under the changes to the continuous motion rule, an offensive player who ends his dribble going toward the basket and absorbs contact from the defense will be permitted to pivot or complete the step the player is on and finish the field goal attempt. This is continuation. This exists currently in the NBA and has forever, and has not existed in college basketball, and has been very frustrating because a player will get fouled and then take an extra step after the foul and finish the shot, hit the shot, and it won't count. And that has always counted in the NBA. It's one of those things where I don't mind that there are rule changes between college basketball and the NBA, or college football and the NFL, or college baseball and the MLB. Like, they shouldn't all be exactly the same. I think that's fine. But this just didn't make sense for it to be different. It didn't make sense for this to not be called the same way. I'm glad that they're changing this. It also picks up offense. More points will be scored. Generally, that is a good thing. More people like to watch basketball, to watch players score points. And when a player makes a cool shot, they get fouled, they take an extra step, they fall away from the rim, they throw it up and they make it. And the only thing you see is the refs waving their hands like this saying, no, it doesn't count. That's no fun. It should count. They made a tough shot. It should count. Like, there was no real reason for this not to exist. So I'm glad they are changing this rule. I wish the Zags still had Caleb Battle, who was incredibly good at this. That would have been a bummer, or that would have been nice to have him be the rule change be put into place last year. But alas, I am glad it is coming. This is a good thing for college basketball. Those are the main things. There's a few other small rule changes, but nothing that's super significant. We'll see how the new coaches challenge goes into effect. I'm curious to see how often it's used, when it's used in games, how often coaches get it right, how often they're correct in their challenge. It'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. That's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We'll be back later this week. Once we find out that media rights deal, we'll be hopefully going live as soon as that information is out so we can talk about it on the show, react to the amount of money Gonzaga's making, where these games are going to be broadcast. That's a big time deal that's coming very soon. We'll also hopefully have a soon update on who is joining this new Pac-12 as well. So keep an eye out for that. Of course, more NBA draft profiles coming your way, more on the transfer portal, recruiting, all that stuff coming as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And as always, go Zags.